The grid died block by block as ash-black snow crossed the river. Rowan Vale watched from Brackett's roof and chose the condemned station before the roads vanished. His service tablet flashed an old thermal model, 18 days before ordinary buildings became lethal. Rowan trusted buried infrastructure over official promises. At Brackett's entrance, Helena Rusk and the remaining officials laughed. Rowan took a crowbar, a flashlight, and the keys they had abandoned. Frost glazed the stairs, yet warm condensation clouded a sealed maintenance door. Rowan followed the contradiction underground and broke the corroded seal. His scarred hand turned a red brass valve 1/4. Buried water answered with a metallic knock, warming a forgotten return loop. Dr. Mara Chen arrived with cold injured adults and a stripped triage case. The hospitals had 48 hours before backup heat failed. On the cracked platform, Rowan drew a blue chalk line around the only zone he could keep above freezing. Mara counted 12 beds. That night, the doors closed against the whiteout. Outside, someone cut the generator hose. Brackett had heat, no reliable power, and enemies. At dawn, Rowan measured every leak the tablet could not see. Brackett had 2 usable rooms, 12 cots, 1 cracked platform, and entrances that bled heat into the stairwells. Andre Bell, a railway mechanic who had followed the maintenance radio, found the hose cut cleanly rather than torn by ice. Only a cup of fuel had spilled, but the message was deliberate. Rowan logged the damage, shut the generator cabinet, and reduced the tablet to 10-minute calculation bursts. Its counter fell from 200 hours to 196. 27 adults waited beyond the blue line by midday. Rowan wanted entry tied to the heat model: beds, body load, air exchange, then admission. Mara insisted the injured could not be treated as optional heat loss. They compromised under pressure. 4 critical patients entered first, 8 workers followed, and the rest received hot water in the sealed stairwell while Andre improved the doors. It was not comfortable or generous, but it was measurable. The platform temperature held at 5 degrees, and nobody pretended that 5 degrees meant safety. Rowan converted the chalk line into the station's first rule. Inside it, no private heaters, no hidden food, and no sleeping space claimed without the board's count. Mara added a second rule. Medical priority could move anyone across the line, but every exception had to be recorded aloud. Rowan disliked rules that could bend. Mara disliked rules that ignored bodies. Their uneasy pairing kept the warm zone from becoming either a locked machine room or a crowded promise. By evening, 22 adults slept inside, and 5 rotated through the stairwell. The north stair leaked more heat than the platform radiators supplied. Sealing it meant giving up the shortest route to the surface and trusting one remaining exit. Rowan and Andre dragged 2 metal doors from a shuttered service corridor, packed their frames with seat cushions, and wedged them beneath the landing. The work cost 6 labour hours and every usable hinge pin in Andre's kit. When the seal finally held, the warm zone rose by 1 degree. The station had gained heat and lost flexibility, the first trade Brackett could not avoid. Ilya Novak arrived through the workshop tunnel, with frost crusted in his copper beard and an engineer's refusal to waste words. The traction feeder was dead, he said, but one ventilation motor might still turn if they dried its windings and replaced a burned contactor. Rowan showed him the geothermal return. Ilya listened to the pipe, then to the silence around it, and agreed to stay for 1 night. His price was authority over electrical safety. Rowan granted it, then wrote the limit beside Mara's triage rules. Mara turned the former first aid room into a clinic with 4 beds, 2 basins, and 1 cabinet that could still lock. She separated cold injuries from respiratory cases and refused to use the last antibiotics on damaged skin without infection. Andre hung insulated curtains, while anonymous adults boiled instruments in enamel pots. The room was crude, but it gave suffering an address. That night, Mara treated 11 patients, discharged 7 back to the platform, and reserved 1 bed for a man whose lungs worsened whenever the station air grew damp. Rowan calibrated the tablet against real temperatures at 6 pipe points. The model expected a straight return beneath the east platform, yet pressure arrived late and warmer from the south. Someone had altered the tunnel after his map was archived. Each correction improved the estimate and consumed battery. By midnight, he had spent 7 more hours to learn that Brackett could support 30 adults only if the south loop stayed open. He marked the unknown branch in grease pencil on the tablet case because the screen itself could not be trusted to remember the city. The unknown branch announced itself with water. A warped grate lifted under pressure, and black runoff spilled across the workshop rails. The utility passage beyond had flooded above the ankle, carrying grit, insulation, and the smell of split concrete. If the water reached the electrical alcove, Ilya's motor plan ended. Rowan ordered the passage dammed with sand and broken tile. That saved the wires but blocked their easiest route toward the south loop. Brackett kept its future power by burying its next answer behind a temporary wall. Ilya and Andre tried a drainage pump recovered from a maintenance cart. Its casing turned, coughed, and tripped the station breaker before moving a bucket of water. Ilya found cracked insulation on the leads and refused a second attempt. Andre argued they could wrap it and keep working by hand. Ilya answered that dead engineers were poor generators. The disagreement delayed the tunnel inspection by a day, but it preserved the only breaker they could still reset. Rowan backed Ilya and assigned Andre to build a safer platform for the pump. Mara's first food audit was worse than the heat audit. 31 adults had 3.2 days of calories at the promised ration, less if labour crews kept working at full pace. Clean water was better. The old wash line produced 80 litres an hour after boiling, though every pot consumed power or heat. Rowan proposed cutting meals immediately. Mara cut strenuous shifts first and kept full portions for the clinic, arguing that starved workers made expensive mistakes. The station accepted smaller evening bowls and slower construction, buying time with discomfort instead of injury. Helena's voice reached Brackett over the municipal analog channel. She declared the station structurally unsafe, denied that its heat return was certified, and ordered everyone to Civic Hall. Rowan answered with pipe temperatures, carbon readings, and the measured platform load. Helena called those numbers unauthorized. He offered to transmit them every 6 hours anyway. Several adults packed for Civic Hall before the exchange ended. Rowan did not stop them. Leadership, he understood, did not include turning a refuge into a trap merely because another shelter lied more confidently. When the wind weakened, Rowan planned a run to the surface market 3 blocks south. He wanted insulation, food, lamp oil, and copper wire, in that order. Mara added a rescue rule. Every team carried 1 spare blanket and returned with any adult unable to walk, even if it meant dropping cargo. Rowan objected that a blanket could cost them a coil of wire. Mara replied that a refuge unable to absorb 1 emergency was only a warmer form of abandonment. He left the blanket on the list. The surface market had become a canyon of frozen tarps and buckled steel. They found grain bins emptied, pharmacies stripped, and 6 municipal insulation bales stacked behind a barrier marked for Civic Hall. Tyre tracks showed a truck had taken the rest before the roads closed. Rowan chose 2 bales, copper pipe, and sealed lentils. Mara found an unconscious vendor beneath quilts and ordered the spare sled cleared. They returned with 1 fewer insulation bale, 1 living adult, and proof that Helena's shelter had received supplies Brackett was told did not exist. The rescued vendor survived, but the journey soaked 1 insulation bale through its torn wrapping. Wet fibre could not line the walls until dried, and drying it would steal heat from sleeping bodies. Rowan spread it above the return pipes in thin layers, sacrificing platform space for 2 days. Andre used the dry bale around the south stair and patched the fuel cabinet with a steel cover. Brackett gained material, a patient, and a visible reason to distrust the city's supply claims. It still lacked enough insulation to admit everyone waiting outside. The return route cost more than the supplies. A gust overturned the copper sled near the river approach, scattering pipe lengths beneath fresh snow. Andre recovered half before Rowan called the search. Staying longer would have spent the margin Mara had preserved for the patient. They reached Brackett with lentils, 3 usable pipe sections, 2 blankets, and no lamp oil. The rescued adult's temperature rose in the clinic. Rowan recorded the lost copper beside the saved life, not to compare their worth, but to keep future decisions honest. By the third morning, the station looked less abandoned. Dried insulation covered the coldest wall, blankets hung as ceiling baffles, and sleeping rows stood on timber pallets above the concrete. Andre built a second inner door from market shutters, creating the frame of an airlock. The work consumed nails, rope, and nearly every straight board they owned. Capacity rose from 22 safe sleepers to 34, while the platform held at 7 degrees. The blue line remained visible under the new walls, a reminder that every improvement had begun as a boundary. Andre completed the airlock from freezer curtains, market shutters, and a bicycle spring that forced the inner door closed. It was ugly and slow. Anyone entering had to wait 30 seconds between doors, while snow melted from boots into a gravel tray. The delay caused arguments during mealtimes, but the stairwell leak dropped by almost a third. Rowan spent 4 tablet hours confirming the gain, then stopped. The improvement was visible in the thermometers and in the fact that sleepers nearest the entrance no longer woke with ice on their blankets. Mara organised labour without pretending every adult could contribute equally. Healthy residents took 2 4-hour shifts. People with cold injuries sorted supplies, watched doors, or rested. The clinic could excuse anyone without public debate, but Mara read the number of exemptions at each meal, so hidden favouritism could not grow. Andre disliked the tokens, until he saw a man with a damaged foot stop lying about pain. Rowan disliked the flexibility, until output improved. The station learned that work rules became stronger when they recognised limits rather than punishing them. 6 more adults arrived before noon, including 2 with severe coughing and 1 who could barely stand. Rowan's model allowed only 3 without dropping the platform below 5 degrees. He closed the inner door after admitting the sickest and told the others to wait in the vestibule. Mara said the vestibule was not shelter. Rowan said a warm room that failed for everyone was not mercy. They argued in front of the waiting group, then built a temporary rotation. 2 hours inside, 1 hour outside, with hot water at each exchange. The rotation gave Rowan enough real data to recalculate body heat, ventilation loss, and sleeping density. The old model had treated the platform as open concrete. The new baffles changed its behaviour. After 3 short calculations, he found space for 8 additional sleepers, if they blocked the unused track trench and moved the clinic exhaust. Mara accepted the threshold because it came with a buildable path. The tablet counter fell to 171 hours. Rowan wrote the number on the case and powered it down before certainty became another form of waste. Helena came in person with 2 anonymous aides and an offer. Civic Hall would provide 20 litres of diesel and 6 food cases if Brackett surrendered its copper, power tools, and the service tablet. She called it consolidation. Rowan called it dismantling the only shelter with renewable heat. Helena reminded him that municipal command still existed. He opened the airlock long enough to show her the platform temperatures, then refused. She left the food where everyone could see it and took it back when no one crossed to her side. Ilya supported the refusal for practical reasons rather than loyalty. The tools Helena wanted were the difference between a warmed platform and a functioning station. He showed Rowan the ventilation motor, now dry enough to open, and the burned contactor that could be rebuilt from relay parts. Without it, Air quality would limit capacity before heat did. With it, Brackett could double clinic ventilation. The repair required copper wire they had failed to recover. Rowan authorised stripping wire from decorative lighting, sacrificing visibility in the concourse to protect breathing on the platform. The first full clinic night tested every rule at once. 4 beds filled, 2 adults vomited after eating too quickly, and the man with weak lungs began gasping when a charcoal heater was moved near the curtain. Mara ordered the heater out before carbon readings rose. Rowan obeyed, though the clinic temperature fell below 6 degrees. They warmed stones at the heat exchange and wrapped them in towels instead. The solution used labour rather than fuel. By dawn, the patient breathed easier, and the station had learned that warmth could become poison when placed badly. Mara traced the symptoms to incomplete combustion and damp fuel, not infection. Ilya found the heater's intake packed with cloth to reduce drafts. Someone had tried to make it warmer by starving it of air. They removed every private flame from the sleeping area and created one supervised cooking point near the exhaust shaft. The platform lost 2 degrees during meals, but carbon readings stayed safe. Rowan added combustion checks to the ration board. The rule felt severe until residents saw the black residue inside the heater pipe. Rowan and Andre entered the workshop tunnel for ducting. The temporary dam still held, though water pressed higher against it. They removed 3 curved sections from a collapsed fan bay, then discovered the 4th trapped beneath a beam. Andre wanted to lever it free. Rowan saw the cracked ceiling and called the attempt. They returned with enough duct to reroute the clinic exhaust, but not enough for the whole platform. The abandoned section remained visible beyond the water, a useful object made dangerous by timing rather than scarcity. The track trench became floor space. Residents laid doors across steel supports, filled gaps with bundled paper, and covered the surface with salvaged rubber mats. Rowan inspected each section because a hidden collapse could injure more people than the extra beds saved. Andre rerouted the clinic exhaust through the recovered duct, freeing one wall for 6 cots. By evening, Brackett had 42 sleeping places, a working airlock, and a platform that stayed above 7 degrees through meal service. The station had reached its 2nd stage, an insulated camp rather than a marked patch of warmth. Visible progress hid physical cost. 3 adults developed back strains from lifting doors, and 1 collapsed after skipping a meal to finish the trench cover. Mara suspended the construction crew for half a day. Rowan objected that the north wall still leaked. She answered that injured labour was not reserve labour. He reviewed the shift records and saw output had already fallen as fatigue rose. The pause cost insulation work, but prevented the clinic from filling with builders. Rowan amended the schedule and admitted he had treated exhaustion as a moral weakness instead of a measurable failure. On the next surface run, fresh tyre ridges appeared beneath the ash snow. A municipal crawler had reached the market after Helena claimed the roads were closed. The insulation stacks were gone, along with lamp oil and most sealed grain. Rowan followed the tracks only far enough to confirm they turned towards Civic Hall. Pursuit would spend daylight they needed for supplies. Mara found powdered milk and gauze in a locked vendor cage. Andre recovered a handcart axle. They returned with less than planned and stronger evidence that scarcity was being directed. Helena intercepted Mara beneath the collapsed canopy. She said the insulation had been assigned to the largest shelter and offered medical supplies if Mara publicly declared Brackett unsafe. Mara asked how many Civic Hall patients had access to the sealed crates behind her. Helena answered that distribution required order. Mara refused the bargain and took only the bandages owed under the city's emergency agreement, witnessed by the adults around them. Helena let her leave, but her expression hardened when no one accepted that command and care were the same thing. Helena offered Civic Hall admission cards to every Brackett resident at the market. The cards promised 1 bed and 2 meals in exchange for relocation before sunset. 9 adults considered leaving. Rowan could not prove Civic Hall would fail. His model was 18 months old and did not include its latest boiler work. He told them exactly that. 4 chose Helena's convoy, while 5 returned with Brackett. Rowan did not call the departures betrayal. A refuge built on informed choice had to survive people choosing differently, even when the choice endangered its labour plan. Rowan tested the tablet against known surface temperatures and found a dangerous gap. Civic Hall's glass atrium acted as a vast heat sink in the old model, but Helena might have sealed it since. He could estimate risk, not certainty. Mara warned him not to use technical language as a substitute for honesty. At the next radio check, he said Civic Hall could be warmer than his map predicted, yet its diesel dependence remained visible in the ledgers and truck movements. The admission weakened his argument and strengthened his credibility. Brackett reached 48 residents and only 5 days of food at reduced portions. Heat capacity had improved, but calories now set the limit. Mara protected full meals for clinic patients, pump crews, and surface teams. Everyone else received the same smaller ration, including Rowan and Mara. Rowan proposed closing admissions until food rose. The public board agreed for 24 hours, with 1 medical exception and 1 review at dawn. It was the first decision neither lead owned alone, and the first time the station's rules outlasted their argument. The geothermal return weakened that night. Temperature stayed warm, but flow fell by 12% as pressure climbed. Ilya opened an inspection plate and found mineral scale packed between the exchanger channels. Cleaning it required shutting the loop for at least 6 hours. Delaying risked a complete blockage. Acting would cool the station during its most crowded night. Rowan used 3 tablet hours to compare both paths. The result favoured repair, but only if the platform could lose 4 degrees without pushing the clinic below freezing. Andre removed the exchanger cover and found copper coils older than the station's public plans. 2 could be cleaned. A third had thinned until a wrench mark dented it. Ilya said the weak coil must be isolated before restart, reducing total output but preventing rupture. That meant Brackett would recover less heat than before unless the ventilation motor also came online. 1 repair now depended on another unfinished repair. Rowan approved both, knowing the station would spend nearly all its spare copper and 1 full night of safe temperature. They planned the shutdown in 12-minute blocks. Ilya would isolate the thin coil. Andre would scrape scale. Rowan would monitor platform loss and reopen the loop if the clinic crossed 2 degrees. The motor crew would rebuild the contactor at the same time, using wire stripped from the concourse lights. Every task had a stop condition and a witness. Mara accepted the plan only after Rowan added heated blankets, warm water rotations, and a clinic evacuation path. The repair became possible because engineering limits and medical limits were written on the same page. When Rowan closed the red valve, Brackett began cooling immediately. Mara moved clinic patients to the centre rows and assigned warm stones by temperature, not rank. Cooking stopped. The airlock opened only for emergencies. At the 3rd hour, frost appeared on the north wall, and 2 residents demanded the loop be restarted. Rowan showed the measured decline and the remaining margin. Mara translated the numbers into consequences. 2 more hours would be uncomfortable. A clogged exchanger tomorrow could be fatal. The crowd endured because both explanations were true. The thin coil cracked while Ilya tightened the isolation clamp. Hot residue sprayed the floor, forcing the team back and costing 20 minutes. Andre cut a gasket from pump rubber while Rowan watched the platform temperature fall through 3 degrees. Restarting early would carry debris into the loop. Continuing risked the clinic. He chose to continue for 30 minutes and sent his own insulated coat to the coldest bed. The improvised gasket held. Ilya sealed the coil, Andre cleared the final channel, and Rowan reached for the valve with 6 minutes left in Mara's limit. The loop restarted with a groan, then settled into a stronger rhythm than before. The isolated coil reduced peak output, but clean channels restored enough flow to compensate. In the workshop tunnel, the rebuilt ventilation motor turned for the first time and pulled stale air toward the exhaust shaft. Platform temperature climbed from 2 degrees to 6 by dawn. Brackett now had a functioning clinic, a powered workshop bench, safer air, and a repaired heat exchange. Its third stage had been purchased with copper, sleep, and one mistake that nearly ended the repair. 2 hours after the repair, the carbon alarm screamed. Residents surged toward the airlock, convinced the restarted loop had poisoned the station. Rowan ordered the doors held closed until the source was known. Opening both at once would dump their recovered heat. Mara checked the nearest patients and found normal oxygen, no headaches, and no shared symptoms. The alarm continued anyway. For 6 tense minutes, Brackett balanced panic against ventilation. Then Mara noticed the sensor was sounding before air reached it. The emergency was in the wire, not the lungs. Ilya opened the sensor box and found a thin staple bridging the alarm contacts. It had been placed by hand after the repair. The false warning had nearly forced both airlock doors open and undone the station's heat gain. Rowan locked the platform exits and demanded every toolkit be inspected. The order stopped movement, but also trapped suspicion inside the warm zone. No one knew whether the sabotage came from a frightened resident, Helena's contractor, or someone hoping to clear beds. The station remained safe, yet trust dropped faster than temperature. Before Rowan finished the inspection, Helena broadcast that Brackett had suffered a carbon monoxide event. Her timing made the sabotage feel coordinated, but timing was not proof. Mara corrected the report over the open channel and invited any listener to compare symptoms, readings, and ventilation flow. Helena repeated that uncertified equipment endangered lives. 5 residents asked to leave for Civic Hall. Mara opened the airlock for them after checking their clothing and giving each a hot water bottle. She would not answer propaganda by making departure physically dangerous. The staple matched the gauge in Andre's maintenance kit. Rowan knew dozens of station boxes used the same size, but he still searched Andre's tools first. Andre submitted without argument, then asked whether every resident would receive the same inspection. Rowan hesitated long enough to reveal the answer. Mara made him start over. Toolkits were checked by 2 witnesses, including Rowan's own, and no matching gap appeared in Andre's supply. The process found no saboteur. It did expose how quickly Rowan's need for control could choose a convenient target. Mara confronted Rowan after the search. He had treated uncertainty like a leak that could be isolated, she said, but people remembered who was sealed out first. Rowan answered that a second sabotage could kill everyone. Mara agreed and demanded a transparent response. Paired access to critical systems, public incident logs, and no private accusation without evidence. Rowan disliked surrendering speed. He disliked even more that she was right. He placed the master keys in a locked box requiring 2 different seals, one engineering and one medical, until residents elected broader oversight. The next meal became Brackett's first public ration meeting. Rowan presented heat capacity, water flow, battery hours, and bed count. Mara presented clinic load, work exemptions, and the consequences of smaller meals. Residents chose 3 heat priority categories: critical medical need, essential system work, and general sleeping space. The categories could be reviewed daily and appealed to 2 rotating adults. No category included loyalty, seniority, or closeness to Rowan. The process took an hour they could have spent building, but afterward, the station's hardest rules belonged to more than 2 people. The tablet had 142 working hours left. Rowan began treating each activation as a public resource. Any calculation longer than 15 minutes required a witness and a stated question. Simple temperature trends moved to paper thermometers and chalk marks. Mara approved because the rule reduced both battery use and Rowan's private authority. The tablet remained his advantage, but no longer his hidden language. He used 2 hours to confirm the repaired exchanger could support 54 sleepers. Brackett already housed 51, leaving almost no margin for the next emergency. The emergency arrived from the high-rises. 17 adults reached the market after their building's pipes burst and its glass stairwell froze. 3 could not continue. Mara and Andre found them during a supply run and radioed Brackett. Rowan answered that safe capacity was 54. Mara counted 68 people if they brought everyone. She did not promise beds. She organised sleds, paired walkers, and returned with the group anyway, forcing the station to confront the difference between a limit and a sentence delivered from far away. Brackett could not absorb 17 people without changing its shape. Rowan placed the strongest newcomers in the airlock corridor and warned that the platform would fall below its safe threshold by morning. Mara moved 6 stable residents from cots to floor mats, freeing beds for the injured. The temperature dropped to 4 degrees, then stabilised as bodies added heat the model had underestimated. Air quality worsened instead. Ilya increased ventilation, losing another ½ degree. By dawn, nobody was warm, but nobody had been abandoned outside. Mara proposed a floor rotation. 6 hours on raised cots, 6 on insulated mats, with clinic exemptions and dry sock checks at every change. Rowan objected that movement would disrupt sleep and open heat curtains. She answered that 54 beds could not become 68 by argument. The rotation worked only after Andre marked one-way aisles and residents learned to move in small groups. Sleep quality fell, yet pressure sores and cold floor injuries stayed manageable. The station had expanded capacity through organisation, not material, and everyone understood that the gain was temporary. At the next public meeting, Rowan proposed closing admissions until insulation or food increased. Mara supported the closure only with 3 conditions. Critical medical cases still entered, the vestibule remained heated, and the decision expired every 12 hours unless renewed. Rowan accepted. The rule prevented a permanent gate disguised as an emergency measure. It also forced the board to look at every waiting face twice a day. Brackett's capacity stood at 68 people, 54 beds, 14 floor spaces, and less than 5 days of food. They returned to the surface market for rigid foam from collapsed advertising frames. The panels were thin, dirty, and pierced by bolts, but dry insulation was worth more than finished walls. Rowan calculated they needed 24 sheets. They could carry 16. Mara found 2 sealed sacks of oats in a flooded kiosk and made room for them, reducing foam to 13 sheets. Andre built a wider sled from the recovered axle. The compromise bought calories and enough insulation to improve the tunnel sleeping rows, but not the outer stair. Helena's crawler appeared as the wind rose, carrying the insulation removed days earlier. Rowan asked for 4 bales and offered geothermal access once the south loop was mapped. Helena demanded the tablet and all copper tools instead. When he refused, her crew parked the crawler across the sheltered route to Brackett. It was not an armed attack. It was a calculation that hand sleds would lose to weather. Rowan turned through the exposed arcade, accepting a longer path rather than surrendering the systems that kept the station alive. Andre found an abandoned display rail beneath the arcade and fitted the sled axle onto it. The improvised cart rolled badly, but carried the foam above the deepest snow. Mara walked beside the rescued oats, checking the team for numb hands at every turn. They reached the station after dark with all 13 panels and no serious injury. Helena's obstruction had cost 6 extra labour hours and 1 cracked wheel bearing. It had also shown Andre that the old market service rail aligned with a maintenance conduit near Brackett, a route absent from Rowan's tablet. One foam panel had split and soaked through at the edge, leaving 12 usable sheets. Rowan assigned 8 to the tunnel wall and 4 around the clinic exhaust. Residents wanted the outer stair covered first because they could feel its draft. The model favoured the tunnel because it created more sleeping area. Rowan explained the choice, then invited a temperature check after installation. The tunnel wall warmed by 2 degrees and added 8 safe floor spaces. Visible evidence quieted the dispute more effectively than authority. The expanded warm zone exposed a new weakness. The wash line crossed an uninsulated ceiling pocket and froze overnight. When pressure returned, a joint split above the clinic corridor. Ilya shut the line before it emptied the storage drums. But clean water fell from 200 litres to 86. Mara suspended laundry and shifted wound cleaning to boiled reserve water. The station could survive 1 day at that level. Rowan moved insulation from the quiet sleeping corner to wrap the pipe, making 20 people colder to protect everyone's water. Ilya rebuilt the drainage pump with the recovered bearing and wire stripped from a ticket machine. Andre added a hand crank coupling so the passage could still drain during power loss. The first run moved water steadily without tripping the breaker. It consumed 1/4 of the ventilation motor's available current, forcing them to alternate air circulation and pumping. Rowan scheduled 90-minute cycles. The platform felt stuffier during drainage, but the flooded utility tunnel dropped by 4 centimetres. Access to the south branch became possible at a real, countable cost. As the water receded, old pipe supports emerged from the wall. They pointed toward a junction the tablet placed 30 metres north. Rowan entered the discrepancy and spent 5 battery hours rebuilding the local model. The corrected path suggested a buried relief conduit connecting Brackett's return to another district loop. If open, it could add heat. If broken, it could drain pressure from everything they had repaired. They could not inspect it until the passage fell below the knee. Rowan kept pumping and postponed expansion, choosing knowledge before another warm promise. Near the exposed junction, Andre found recent boot prints pressed into the silt and fresh scratches on a bypass cover. Someone had entered before the flood rose. The marks were narrow enough for a contractor's cutting bar, but they proved no identity. Rowan photographed them with the tablet, spending minutes he had tried to save. Andre noted that the cover bolts had been loosened and retightened in the wrong order. The bypass had not failed from age. Someone had inspected or altered it after Brackett was condemned. The new tunnel measurements explained part of Brackett's missing pressure, but not all of it. Heat was leaving the exchange in short pulses, as if a downstream valve opened at night. Rowan checked every station-controlled valve and found their seals intact. The tablet could identify the loss pattern, not the hand behind it. He reduced night flow to protect the clinic, lowering sleeping temperature by 1 degree. The decision preserved pressure and made residents feel the sabotage in their blankets, which turned uncertainty into anger. Access records narrowed the problem. The bypass cover required a maintenance badge at the workshop gate, and Andre's badge had opened it twice after midnight. Andre said he had been checking the drainage route and had told no one because Rowan would have stopped him. The admission sounded like concealment because it was. Rowan removed his tunnel access and assigned him to platform repairs until the board could review the facts. Andre accepted the restriction, but not the implication. Trust that had survived hunger now fractured over a line in a log. Mara treated a cut across Andre's palm and asked where he had gotten it. He said an older conduit beyond the service rail had jammed and he had been clearing it alone. He believed it could become a relief route for people trapped near Civic Hall. Mara asked why he hid the work. Andre answered that Rowan measured every unplanned hour as theft from the station. She did not excuse the secrecy, but she checked the clinic log. On one of the suspicious nights, Andre had been receiving stitches while his badge still registered at the gate. Mara brought the clinic time to Rowan before the review. He checked the mechanical clock against the gate log and found a 7-minute overlap impossible for Andre to have created. Either the badge record had been copied or someone had used a duplicate credential. Rowan wanted to keep Andre suspended until the source was known. Mara argued that unresolved suspicion was not evidence. The board restored Andre's platform work but kept paired tunnel access. Rowan agreed publicly, though privately he still feared that restoring trust too soon would invite a second strike. Rowan followed Andre into the older conduit at the next pump cycle. It was too narrow for carts and absent from the tablet, but warm air moved through it from the southeast. Andre had cleared 20 metres by hand, bracing loose masonry with scrap rail. He had not opened the far gate because the pressure difference could flood the passage. The secret work was dangerous, unauthorised, and useful. Rowan saw all three truths at once. He ordered the route mapped, shored, and placed under paired access instead of sealing it. Andre explained that the conduit once carried emergency return water between district boilers. If reopened, it could move people and heat without using the surface. Mara saw a rescue corridor. Rowan saw an untested pressure path. The board authorised inspection only, with no valve changes and no sleepers beyond the braced section. Andre accepted the limits because the route now belonged to the station rather than his private judgment. Mara assigned 2 adults to document every support and injury, making the tunnel a public project instead of a hidden gamble. At the far end, Ilya found filings from a modern abrasive blade in the old hinge recess. The cut had not opened the conduit, but it had weakened the bypass housing enough to leak under pressure. Rowan's model showed the leak beginning on nights linked to Andre's badge. The physical evidence still pointed toward deliberate access, yet the tool marks were months old beneath newer rust. Whoever prepared the failure had done so before Andre joined Brackett. That shifted the question from who betrayed the Refuge now to who had planned for its future collapse. The board met to decide Andre's status. Rowan presented the badge openings, secret tunnel work, and inconsistent timing. Mara presented the clinic overlap and the age of the cut. Andre admitted violating access rules, but denied selling the route. Several residents wanted him removed before uncertainty became catastrophe. Rowan nearly agreed. Then Mara asked the simplest question. How could Andre sell a route Helena's office had already surveyed months before he arrived? The station postponed judgment and ordered the tablet's maintenance history examined in public. The tablet stored more than maps. Its maintenance slot held a sync history Rowan had never checked, because field inspectors rarely needed it. He powered the device for 40 minutes and found an external copy made 4 months earlier through the Deputy Mayor's infrastructure office. The copied package included Brackett's bypass route, inspection notes, and his old credentials. Helena's staff had possessed enough information to duplicate Andre's access pattern before the disaster. The revelation did not prove who placed the staple, but it cleared the central accusation against Andre. Rowan transmitted the sync date and office authorization over the open channel. Helena answered that municipal offices routinely archived infrastructure data. She did not deny the copy. Rowan asked why Brackett's bypass had been cut after her office obtained the route. Helena called the question reckless and ended the exchange. Her refusal was not a confession, and Rowan said so. Still, every listener now understood that the leak had begun in official records, not Andre's loyalty. The station's anger moved upward, from one mechanic to a system built on concealed control. Rowan apologized to Andre in front of the same people who had heard the accusation. He did not soften it with excuses. He had treated a pattern as a verdict because the pattern fit his fear. Andre accepted the apology and demanded a change. No critical route would depend on one badge again, including Rowan's. The board adopted paired credentials for the heat exchange, tunnel gates, and tablet use. Andre returned to the relief conduit under those rules. Trust did not reset, but the repair became visible and shared. Work on the relief conduit accelerated. Andre cleared the remaining debris, Ilya laid a low drainage line, and residents built braced sleeping alcoves in the dry section. The route did not yet connect to another shelter, but it added protected space beyond the crowded platform. Brackett's fourth stage began as a connected tunnel refuge. Clinic, workshop, heat exchange, and sleeping zones linked under one set of rules. Capacity rose to 78 safe sleepers. Food, not heat, remained the sharper limit. And the new tunnel added mouths faster than it added supplies. Helena responded by calling Brackett's tunnel work theft from municipal property. Her broadcast described the station as unstable, crowded, and controlled by an unlicensed inspector. Some claims were false. The crowding was not. Mara answered with current bed count, clinic load, carbon readings, and the unresolved food shortage. She refused to sell Brackett as perfect. That honesty brought 2 Civic Hall nurses to the airlock, after their shelter reduced patient heat overnight. They arrived without supplies and with information. Helena's boiler had begun cycling off every 6 hours. The Civic Hall cycle changed Rowan's calculations. If its boiler failed, the old relief conduit might transfer heat from Brackett, but only if a return pump balanced both loops. Without balance, Civic Hall would drain Brackett's pressure and freeze both shelters. The tablet estimated one workable range, yet the map lacked recent pipe changes. Mara asked whether they should prepare anyway. Rowan said preparation cost copper, labour, and insulation they needed now. They agreed to build only the pump foundation, preserving the option without pretending rescue was guaranteed. Ilya examined the abandoned district pump and found its housing intact, but the armature windings had burned. Rebuilding it required more copper than remained in Brackett. The surface market might still contain motor wire inside refrigeration units, though reaching it meant crossing Helena's supply route. Rowan authorised one final salvage run before the next storm. Mara required a shorter search limit and 2 return signals. The pump could become a bridge to Civic Hall, but it could not be allowed to consume the people Brackett already had. They reached the market under a brittle dawn. Andre opened 2 refrigeration motors, while Rowan cut windings free. Mara heard the roof before anyone saw it move. She ordered the team back as a canopy section collapsed across the aisle, trapping an anonymous scavenger beneath a light frame. Rowan looked at the copper still inside the second motor, then at the narrowing exit. They abandoned half the wire and lifted the frame. The rescued adult could walk, but Mara's medical sled was crushed, taking bandages and 1 heated case with it. Mara used the last sterile pads on the scavenger's shoulder and left the ruined case behind. Rowan carried only 9 kilograms of copper, less than Ilya requested. On the return, he asked whether saving the stranger had endangered both shelters. Mara said yes. Then she asked whether he would design a refuge whose rescue rule vanished whenever the numbers became painful. Rowan had no clean answer. The choice had cost material, and the station would have to absorb that cost, without rewriting the act into either heroism or foolishness. Ilya confirmed the recovered copper was only half enough for a full rewind. Andre proposed combining it with thinner wire stripped from unused signal relays. The mixed winding would run hotter and require shorter cycles, but it could move water for 20 minutes at a time. Rowan accepted the limitation and ordered a manual temperature cutoff. The pump would not be powerful enough to rescue Civic Hall continuously. It might be enough to balance an emergency transfer, provided someone monitored it without interruption. They accepted a weaker machine because its weakness was known, To replace the lost calories, Mara negotiated with surface traders who reached Brackett through the market arcade. She exchanged duplicate surgical instruments and 2 sealed pain relief packs for oats, dried beans, and salt. Rowan objected to trading medicine. Mara showed him the clinic inventory. The traded packs exceeded projected need, while food would fail in 4 days. The board witnessed the exchange and recorded what remained. Brackett gained 3 days of calories and lost a portion of its medical reserve, a risk chosen in daylight rather than hidden in a locked cabinet. Ilya rewound the pump over 14 hours, alternating with Andre when his fingers cramped. The mixed wire laid unevenly and forced them to rebuild the jig twice. Each correction consumed insulation varnish and time. When the armature finally turned, it drew more current than planned, but stayed below the cutoff for 11 minutes. That was not success. It was a usable constraint. Ilya wrote the cycle beside the switch and required 2 operators for every run. The relief plan now had a weak mechanical heart and no promise it would survive the coming cold. Andre widened the relief conduit enough for a stretcher and insulated its lowest section with the damaged foam panels. Rowan inspected every brace and rejected 2 that leaned against cracked masonry. Rebuilding them delayed the route, but prevented a collapse under snow load above. The connected tunnel now held 20 sleeping mats, a drainage channel, and an emergency cart path. Brackett's safe capacity reached 86. The gain looked impressive until the next group of arrivals filled the new space within a day. The new space carried no spare comfort. 30 adults from the Civic Hall district appeared beyond the frost gate after their apartments lost water. Rowan saw the gate thermometer falling and closed the inner barrier before the group reached it. Mara arrived to find them pounding on steel while snow streamed through the outer passage. Rowan said admitting everyone would push Brackett below 1 degree. Mara said closing a gate without triage turned engineering into judgment at a distance. Their argument echoed through the tunnel, while the waiting adults watched both leaders fail to agree. Rowan held the gate closed for 11 minutes. During that time, Mara assessed people through the bars, identified 4 critical cases, and ordered the outer group into the wind shadow. She did not deny the heat limit. She denied that one person should apply it alone. Rowan opened the gate for the 4 patients and 6 support adults, then closed it again. The remaining 20 sheltered in the conduit vestibule with hot water and blankets while the board met. The compromise saved heat, but the delay left 2 adults with deeper cold injuries. Mara accused Rowan of treating the gate as a switch instead of a moral decision. Rowan answered that she had brought 17 people days earlier without knowing where they would sleep. Both were correct about the other's failure. The board created an emergency vestibule rule. Medical assessment at the outer barrier, a 10-person immediate intake limit, and authority for 2 rotating coordinators to override closure when measurable harm outside exceeded the projected loss inside. No single engineer or physician would control admission again. The argument ended only when the rules changed. Andre converted the Frostgate vestibule into a temporary shelter with insulated partitions, raised benches, and a small return pipe. Mara established a 2-hour medical rotation there. The work cost 6 foam sheets from the platform ceiling, lowering Brackett's central temperature by nearly a degree. In exchange, 20 adults could wait above freezing while beds were reassigned. The station had not abolished capacity. It had moved the edge of abandonment farther from the door and made the cost visible to everyone already inside. Waiting became safer, though never easy. The revised heat priority system combined Rowan's thresholds with Mara's exceptions. Critical patients received the warmest beds. Essential crews received full meals and timed rest, not permanent privilege. Newcomers entered a 48-hour assessment period without being required to work while cold injuries stabilised. After that, Contribution meant labour, care, repair, teaching, or shared chores according to ability. Appeals went to rotating coordinators. The rules satisfied neither lead completely, which was one reason residents trusted them. Brackett's authority was becoming procedural rather than personal. The board posted examples beside each category. By day 12, the station held 86 safe sleepers and 14 clinic beds. The platform camp had become a working refuge. One lit repair bench, scheduled ventilation, boiled water points, a ration board, and a connected tunnel wing. Medical cases no longer blocked construction, because the clinic had its own heat curtain and exhaust. Ilya's power cycles kept the pump and fan alternating without breaker trips. Every visible upgrade carried a matching restriction, and residents had begun to understand that durability came from limits observed together. The numbers remained harsh. Food covered 4.5 days at reduced portions. Clean water was stable only while the wrapped wash line held. The tablet had 109 hours left. Clinic beds were nearly full, and the Frostgate vestibule housed 16 more adults. Rowan proposed another market run for dry goods. Mara approved only after 2 residents volunteered to remain behind as medical coordinators. The Refuge was finally strong enough for both leads to leave the platform without leaving all decisions suspended. The market run yielded no miracle cash. They bought split peas, hard crackers, candles, and 2 drums of cooking alcohol from adults who had salvaged separate buildings. Payment came in repair labour, clinic time, and 1 spare pump bearing. Rowan refused a sealed fuel can because its source could not be verified. Andre reinforced the rail cart with shelving metal, increasing its load while making it harder to steer. They returned with 6 days of food for current residents and a promise to repair 3 traders' heaters at Brackett. Mara saw Helena's crew buying every lamp oil tin offered, paying with Civic Hall admission priority. The deal left nearby adults with food, but no safe light or cooking flame. Helena said centralized purchase prevented dangerous private heaters. Mara asked why the oil was moving into a locked municipal sled instead of the public distribution line. Helena did not answer. The exchange confirmed a pattern. Helena managed scarcity by making access depend on obedience. Mara returned to Brackett, determined that its rules remain visible even when visibility made every shortage harder to defend. Ilya tested the district pump against the relief conduit. It moved enough water to balance a small transfer, but the mixed winding reached its temperature limit after 13 minutes. Cooling required at least 30. Rowan entered the curve into the tablet and used 6 battery hours to model alternating cycles. The result could support Civic Hall only if its own loop retained some pressure. A complete boiler rupture would still overwhelm Brackett. They had built a bridge that worked only while the far bank remained standing. Andre inspected the Frostgate and found ice building beneath its lower track. The manual wheels still moved, but only with 2 people and a pry bar. If the final cold wave deepened, the gate could freeze shut between shelters. Rowan ordered daily clearing and a heated cable around the hinge, costing power during pump cycles. Andre argued for a wider drain instead. They did both, taking 4 adults from insulation work. The gate became safer, while the platform ceiling remained thinner than planned. Civic Hall's ration cuts drove another wave toward Brackett. 26 adults arrived in one afternoon. The vestibule absorbed 10, the tunnel wing 12, and the clinic 4. Safe capacity rose only because floor rotations tightened and common areas lost privacy. Rowan warned that Brackett now held 112 people against 96 planned spaces. Mara answered that the next decision must reduce risk rather than merely announce it. They suspended non-essential repair work, converted the workshop classroom into sleeping space at night, and shortened cooking hours to protect air quality. Helena offered to transfer 8 Civic Hall patients if Brackett surrendered the rebuilt pump and its remaining copper. She framed the demand as an exchange between shelters. Rowan refused to trade away the system that might later save both. Instead, he offered a joint repair team, witnessed inventory, and shared pump access under public rules. Helena rejected outside oversight. Her answer clarified that the dispute was not simply about resources. She wanted Brackett's tools under her command, even if shared use would produce more heat. Mara sent blankets and a medical team through the frost gate without surrendering equipment. Civic Hall guards allowed 6 patients to cross, but blocked Brackett workers from inspecting the boiler. The patients arrived with cold injuries caused by sleeping room temperatures below freezing, not by exposure outside. Mara documented their condition and broadcast only the measurements, avoiding accusation. Helena called the transfer voluntary triage. Whatever the label, Brackett now knew Civic Hall was failing faster than its public reports admitted. The transfer revealed how quickly secrecy became injury. Behind an access plate near the frost gate, Andre found the bypass cut nearly through. Pressure and ice had finished what a blade began. The metal edge was too clean for corrosion and matched the filings at the relief conduit. Ilya traced the line back toward Brackett's exchanger. If it separated completely, the station would lose return water during the coldest period. The sabotage had been placed where ordinary inspections would miss it until the system carried emergency load. They had less than 3 days to brace the pipe. The old tablet map showed the bypass 10 meters away from its true location. That alteration explained why Rowan's earlier model had underestimated loss. He spent 9 hours rebuilding the network around measured pipe lengths and pressure tests. The updated result was grim. Helena's cut could make Brackett fail before Civic Hall's diesel ran out, exactly when desperate residents would be easiest to absorb under central command. The model could not prove intent, but the timing aligned with the diverted insulation, copied access package, and false alarm broadcast. The station needed evidence stronger than inference. At the market depot, traders had saved carbon copies of municipal fuel dispatches for barter accounting. The pages showed Civic Hall receiving diesel, while Helena publicly claimed equal distribution. A punch-coded maintenance tag matched the contractor batch used near the bypass. Rowan did not declare the case finished. He placed the copies, the tablet sync record, and the cut metal photographs under paired custody. Mara arranged for witnesses from both shelters to hear the chain of evidence over analog radio. Helena met them at the market and invoked emergency requisition authority over the documents. Mara refused because the records concerned both shelters and had already been copied to witnesses. Helena said public argument would cause panic. Mara answered that concealed shortages had already caused movement, injury, and sabotage. She offered Helena a place in a joint evidence review. Helena declined unless she chaired it. The refusal cost her more than any angry speech. Adults nearby heard that Brackett had offered procedure and Civic Hall had demanded control. Rowan summarised the evidence over the open channel. Diverted insulation, diesel dispatches, copied infrastructure access, and a bypass cut placed before Brackett reopened. He separated proven facts from conclusions. Mara followed with Civic Hall patient temperatures and Brackett's actual capacity, making clear that neither shelter could absorb the other without preparation. Helena interrupted to call the broadcast sedition. Rowan answered that heat did not recognise office. The exchange did not remove her, but it gave Civic Hall adults information they had been denied. No claim went unanswered, but none was hidden. Self-evacuation began within hours. Families of adults, maintenance crews, and clinic patients reached the frost gate in groups small enough to manage, but too numerous to house. Mara triaged at the vestibule. Andre opened the gate in time cycles that preserved pressure and heat. Brackett admitted the critical, assigned others to insulated tunnel space, and asked healthy arrivals to help brace the bypass after warming. No one was promised permanent space. The process was slow, visible, and far less dangerous than a mass rush. Brackett now supported 112 residents and another 20 in the vestibule. The exchanger could hold if the outside temperature stayed near current levels. Forecasts from analog stations suggested a final 40-hour whiteout colder than anything before it. Ilya warned that the rebuilt pump might survive 6 emergency cycles, perhaps 8. The tablet had 71 hours remaining. Rowan proposed reserving all of them for the final balance calculation. From that point, the station would navigate by thermometers, clocks, and human observation. Every spare blanket already had an owner. Rowan recommended closing the relief conduit before the whiteout. That would protect Brackett from Civic Hall's unstable boiler and preserve their weak pump. Mara said closure would remove the only safe rescue route after surface travel became impossible. Rowan replied that an open route could drain heat from everyone already inside. The board delayed the decision 6 hours and ordered direct measurements at Civic Hall's side of the frost gate. For once, disagreement produced a question they could answer, rather than a battle of principles. Mara and Andre crossed to the Civic Hall side under escort. The boiler room remained closed, but the return pipe temperature was low and unstable. They heard repeated hammering through the wall, the sound of trapped vapour or failing valves. Mara counted more than 200 adults in the hall's sleeping zones, from the movement through connecting corridors. Evacuation before the storm was no longer possible. They returned with measurements showing Civic Hall still retained enough pressure for a shared loop, but the margin was shrinking. The board rejected both extremes. The relief conduit would remain available, but normally isolated. Opening it during the storm would require agreement from engineering, medical, and 2 rotating coordinators, unless delay caused immediate deaths. Rowan accepted the shared trigger. Mara accepted that Civic Hall could not be warmed at any cost. The decision tied compassion to measured conditions and engineering to public review. It also meant that when the crisis came, neither lead could hide behind the other's authority. The trigger rules were repeated over radio. To keep the relief conduit from freezing, they stripped 6 insulation panels from Brackett's mezzanine ceiling and wrapped the pipe. The move protected a possible rescue route while making the central platform colder. Residents carried their own blankets into common areas and accepted shorter meal periods to compensate. Ilya added a heat sensor to the pump winding. Andre widened the manual drain at the frost gate. Every preparation for Civic Hall weakened some part of Brackett, which made the coming choice real rather than ceremonial. The platform lost 3 degrees after the insulation move. Frost returned above the outer rows, and clinic staff moved 2 respiratory patients inward. Rowan considered reversing the work. Mara refused to pretend the cost surprised them. The board had chosen it knowingly. Instead, they reduced ventilation during quiet hours, increased moisture checks, and shifted cooking to the workshop exhaust. The station held at 4 degrees. Brackett was less comfortable and more capable of helping another shelter, a trade no private leader could have imposed without resentment. Helena came to the frost gate before the storm and demanded direct control of the district pump under municipal authority. Rowan offered her 1 seat on the joint emergency board and equal access to measurements. She refused any arrangement in which her decision could be outvoted. He denied control, but allowed her engineers to inspect the pump with witnesses. Helena left after seeing how limited it was. For the first time, her expression showed fear, not of Brackett's defiance, but of a machine too weak to obey anyone's certainty. On the night before the whiteout, Mara and Rowan walked the station without speaking much. The clinic held 14 patients. Food covered 3 days at storm ration. Clean water stood at 600 litres. The tablet held 71 hours, though its battery would cool faster if power failed. Rowan checked every curtain twice. Mara checked every adult who had hidden numbness to remain on a work crew. Their partnership had become less about agreement than about seeing the risks the other would miss. Around them, others maintained the systems without instruction. Ilya ran the pump once and stopped at 12 minutes, 1 minute below the winding limit. Andrei cleared the frost gate track and placed pry bars at both ends. Rowan sealed the tablet in an insulated case beside the red valve. They marked manual fallback pressures on the gauge faces with coloured tape, using no digital display. The final plan depended on one weak pump, one unfinished conduit, and adults willing to follow shared rules while afraid. Nothing about it resembled rescue from outside. It was only preparation made visible. Helena sent 2 severe patients to Brackett minutes before closing Civic Hall's side. Mara accepted them and returned written treatment limits through a witness. Helena asked whether Brackett would open the loop if her boiler failed. Mara answered that the joint board would act on measured danger to both shelters. It was not the unconditional promise Helena wanted, but it was more than Helena had offered Brackett. The gate shut between them as the wind rose, leaving authority on each side and one conduit beneath. The final whiteout arrived before dawn. Snow and ash erased the station entrance in minutes, and exterior temperatures fell beyond the lowest marks on their simple gauges. Rowan sealed the airlock. Mara ordered storm rations and suspended all non-essential movement. The platform settled into dim amber light, while wind pressed against every barrier they had built. Brackett entered the 40-hour test with 132 adults, 14 clinic beds, 6 pump cycles, and no road left to another choice. Every entrance became a pressure boundary. For 8 hours, the station held. Then, Civic Hall's return pressure began jumping in violent pulses. Rowan and Ilya heard metal striking metal through the shared line. The isolated conduit protected Brackett, but each pulse drove colder water toward the bypass brace. Ilya tightened the clamp and warned that the pipe could last the storm only if pressure stayed below its current peak. Rowan kept the tablet off. Every calculation saved now might be needed when the system stopped behaving like the old map. Civic Hall adults reached the frost gate before noon, sent through in groups after sleeping rooms dropped below freezing. The vestibule filled to capacity. Mara admitted the most vulnerable and held the rest above zero with heated benches and shared blankets. Andrei opened the inner gate only during pump-off intervals to reduce pressure loss. The process preserved Brackett's heat, but moved slowly enough that anger rose on both sides. Mara kept repeating the same truth. Entry order followed medical harm, not shelter origin or political loyalty. Helena arrived with municipal seals and demanded the pump key. She said fragmented command was causing delay. Rowan answered that delay came from weak equipment and too many people, not from voting. He offered immediate joint measurements. Helena ordered her aides to hold the gate while she crossed. But Brackett's rotating coordinators blocked the control corridor without violence. Rowan did not threaten to freeze her side. He opened the medical lane and closed the authority lane, separating care from command. The coordinators asked Civic Hall listeners to witness the exchange. Mara reported 3 new cold injuries from the vestibule and 1 cardiac patient unable to tolerate another transfer delay. Rowan showed her Brackett's platform temperature, 3.6 degrees, and falling. Opening the conduit would accelerate the loss before it helped Civic Hall. Mara did not demand immediate action. She asked him to define the point at which not opening became the greater danger. Together they set triggers. Civic Hall return pressure below minimum, Brackett above 3 degrees, and pump winding cold enough for a full cycle. Ilya improved pump cooling by bolting scrap fins to the housing and directing ventilation across them. The change cost warm air from the platform, but shortened recovery between cycles by 6 minutes. Andre doubled the conduit braces with rail clips taken from an unused sleeping section, reducing capacity by 4 mats. Each adjustment made the rescue system stronger and Brackett slightly weaker. The board approved both because the trade was explicit. By hour 15, they had 7 possible cycles instead of 6, provided the motor windings remained dry. The Civic Hall boiler ruptured at hour 16. Pressure vanished from its return, then surged backward with trapped steam. The bypass brace jumped against its anchors. Ilya cut the district pump before the surge reached the mixed winding. Rowan opened the local relief valve and sacrificed heated water into the drain to protect Brackett's exchanger. The platform lost another half degree. Over the radio came reports of Civic Hall rooms cooling in minutes. The model's safe assumption that the far loop retained pressure had just disappeared. Helena requested full evacuation. Mara counted the people visible and told her the conduit could not move them all before exposure became fatal. Civic Hall needed heat where it stood. Helena demanded the rebuilt pump and Brackett's exchanger controls. Mara answered that moving equipment would take hours they did not have. She proposed opening the relief conduit in controlled cycles. Helena rejected any plan that left Brackett holding the valves. Mara turned to the waiting adults and explained the choice over the radio, bypassing command without humiliating the people trapped under it. Rowan finally powered the tablet. With the boiler gone, every model returned the same answer. Preserve Brackett or feed Civic Hall, not both. The calculation assumed the unfinished conduit leaked at its old rate and the rebuilt pump ran continuously. Mara asked what happened if they used short cycles, manual gate clearing, and the warmer relief route Andre had opened. Rowan said the map lacked those changes. She answered that the map was now the least complete witness in the room. For the first time, he chose to model a plan invented by people rather than infrastructure records. Mara proposed opening the unfinished conduit before the main bypass, letting warm air and low-pressure water temper the frozen line. The route had never been tested under emergency flow. A failure could flood the sleeping tunnel. Rowan ordered the alcoves cleared, costing 30 adults their only warm space, and stationed blankets on the platform. The board approved one 7-minute trial. Mara stayed at the valve while Rowan returned to the exchanger. Their plan depended on admitting uncertainty instead of hiding it. Flood barriers waited beside every sleeping alcove. Ilya restored the pump with the mixed winding still below cutoff. Rowan entered real pressure from Brackett, the relief conduit, and Civic Hall's dead return. The tablet recalculated slowly in the cold, consuming battery faster than before. It found a narrow balance: 9 minutes of pump, 4 minutes of local relief, then a 30-minute cooling period. The sequence could keep both loops above freezing if the frost gate opened fully and the conduit leak stayed under 12%. Neither condition was guaranteed. The first cycle would decide whether the design deserved another. Andre reached the frost gate and found the lower track frozen solid. The heated cable had failed where moisture entered a splice. He could clear the ice only by opening the outer panel to the whiteout. Mara wrapped his harness line around a rail and limited exposure to 90-second intervals. Andre chipped, withdrew to warm his hands, then returned. Each attempt moved the gate a few centimetres. The first pump cycle could not begin until he created enough opening for balanced flow. Ice chips filled the drain faster than he cleared them. The tablet's battery dropped through its final reserve as Rowan corrected the conduit length and heat loss. He could save charge for later, or spend it now refining the first cycle. A bad opening surge would destroy the pump before later mattered. He used the remaining power. The screen gave one final pressure range, then went black for good. Rowan set the dead tablet beside the red valve. His advantage had ended exactly where human coordination became the only system left. The black screen reflected his face, and nothing else. Helena entered the heat exchange during Andre's fourth clearing attempt. She carried emergency orders and told Rowan's coordinators to surrender the control room. Mara blocked the valve path and asked whether Helena accepted the joint cycle plan. Helena said municipal authority could not be conditional. Her aides moved toward the key box, but residents closed ranks without striking them. Rowan kept his attention on pressure. Mara told Helena that medical care remained open, command did not, and the evidence review would begin over radio immediately. Rowan read the evidence chain to both shelters. Diesel dispatch copies witnessed at the market, insulation diverted under Helena's office, the tablet sync package copied months earlier, duplicated access patterns, and contractor cuts at the bypass. He stated what remained unproven. Helena answered that every act had served central survival. Rowan said intention did not erase hidden risk or sabotage. Civic Hall adults demanded a vote on emergency command. Brackett's board agreed, and the radio channel carried each shelter's counted response. The documents remained available for later review. The vote removed Helena from sole emergency command and formed a joint board with equal coordinators from both shelters, one engineering seat and independent medical authority. Helena received a seat only as a resident representative, not as chair. She refused at first, then found no crew willing to seize the controls for her. The decision was not unanimous. It was sufficient, witnessed, and made before the heat returned. Mara immediately treated frost damage on Helena's hand, proving that loss of authority did not mean loss of care. Andre cleared the final ice ridge at hour 21. The frost gate moved a hand's width, stopped, then opened under the combined pull of 6 adults. Cold air tore through the passage. Mara ordered the vestibule cleared and gave Rowan the signal over radio. Andre remained at the wheel, manually holding it against warped tracks. The open gate created the condition the tablet required, but it also exposed Brackett to the dead shelter's cold. There would be no safe pause once the pump began. Ilya started the district pump. The mixed winding whined but held. Rowan opened the red valve to the final mark from the dead tablet and watched Brackett pressure fall. At 6 minutes, Civic Hall's return rose above freezing. At 9, Ilya cut power. Rowan opened local relief for 4 minutes, bleeding enough heat to prevent reversal. The sequence matched the model once. One success meant only that the next failure would come with better information. They began the 30-minute cooling wait while both shelters shivered. Warm condensation appeared on Civic Hall's side during the second cycle. Adults there moved bedding away from frozen walls and clustered near return pipes, reducing the volume they needed to heat. Mara coordinated those changes by radio, turning people into part of the balance Rowan's model could not predict. Andre cleared new ice after every pump run. His hands lost sensation despite heated wraps, so Mara replaced him for one interval and forced him to warm before returning. Competence included stopping the person everyone needed. The fourth cycle overshot. Civic Hall's return warmed too quickly, then shoved pressure back toward Brackett. Rowan closed the bypass halfway, while Ilya cut the pump at 7 minutes. Smoke rose from the winding varnish, using one of their remaining cycles. The platform dropped to 2.8 degrees, below the trigger they had set. Under the old rule, rescue should stop. Mara reported Civic Hall had reached 3 degrees and could survive 1 cooling interval. The joint board ordered a pause rather than abandonment. During the pause, Mara found Rowan beside the blue line with his dead tablet in his lap. He said the model had been right about the limit and wrong about the choice. She answered that limits still mattered. The pause existed because his threshold had protected Brackett. Their argument had not produced a winner. It had produced a system capable of stopping, checking, and continuing. They drank half cups of hot water and returned to work before the pump cooled, carrying no promise except the next measured decision. Ilya replaced the scorched winding wrap with insulation stripped from a spare relay. Andrei widened the drain so meltwater stopped refreezing under the frost gate. Rowan tightened the conduit braces after one shifted under pressure. The repair consumed their last dry electrical cloth and 2 rail clips reserved for bed supports. Sleeping capacity dropped again as mats moved to the platform. The system returned to service, weaker in materials but stronger in measured flow. They prepared 3 shorter cycles instead of 2 full ones. Without command, Helena chose whether to contribute. She began by carrying blankets to Civic Hall's coldest room, then returned with accurate head counts her staff had previously withheld. Mara accepted the information without praise or punishment. The true population was 23 higher than Rowan's estimate, explaining the pressure demand. The board adjusted sleeping zones on the Civic side and reduced the area requiring heat. Helena's knowledge remained useful once separated from exclusive authority. Her hearing would come later. The storm still required her work. The final planned cycle began at hour 32. Ilya held the cutoff, while Rowan balanced the red valve by sound and gauge movement. No tablet remained to smooth their uncertainty. Civic Hall's return rose slowly. Brackett's pressure stayed above the brace limit, and the pump winding approached its maximum without crossing it. At 8 minutes, they stopped. Both shelters held just above 4 degrees. The system could survive if no new rupture occurred, and everyone conserved movement through the last 8 hours. Everyone waited for the gauge to settle. The last hours became an exercise in restraint. No one opened unnecessary doors. Cooking stopped. Adults shared blankets in assigned clusters and passed water by hand to avoid traffic. Mara treated cold injuries without moving patients unless circulation failed. Andrei kept the frost gate open with a rail brace and checked it every 15 minutes. Civic Hall sent pressure readings on schedule. Brackett sent clinic and temperature counts back. The heat held because hundreds of adults followed rules they had heard, questioned, and accepted. At hour 40, the wind weakened. The outer stair remained buried, but pressure stopped falling, and daylight returned as a grey band above the doors. Brackett's platform stood at 4.2 degrees. Civic Hall held at 4. No one had frozen in either shelter, though the clinic carried the cost in damaged hands, strained hearts, and exhaustion. Rowan opened no valve in celebration. Mara ended storm ration only after the board confirmed food and water. Survival was recorded as a result, not a miracle. 2 days later, the joint board held Helena's preliminary hearing. She faced evidence of concealed diesel allocation, diverted insulation, copied access records, and the contractor cut bypass. She argued that centralizing resources had been necessary. Witnesses challenged both the necessity and the secrecy. The board removed her from logistics access, pending a full hearing, and assigned supervised work, medical care, and an advocate. Rowan did not ask for exile. A refuge that, punished by cold, would only rebuild Helena's logic with different people in charge. Emergency authority was replaced with a district charter. Heat, food, water, medical beds and work assignments would be posted daily. Coordinators rotated every 7 days. Engineering could close a system for immediate safety, but the closure required review. Medical priority remained independent and could not be traded for labour or loyalty. Evidence records stayed under paired custody. Rowan accepted 1 engineering seat, not command. Mara accepted medical authority with a review board. Brackett's 5th stage had begun, a governed district heat node rather than a shelter ruled by whoever held the warmest key. The first post-storm repair replaced the temporary bypass brace with a bolted sleeve built from market steel and the last intact gasket sheet. Rowan and Ilya worked under the new closure rule, announcing each shutdown and its expected temperature loss. The repair took longer than Rowan preferred because observers verified every step. It also ended with no hidden decisions. When pressure returned, the loop held steady. Brackett could warm Civic Hall at low flow without the emergency pump, turning a desperate rescue path into the beginning of a district system. Mara's clinic shifted from crisis triage to recovery. Cold injuries required weeks of dressing changes, and exhaustion exposed illnesses people had hidden during the storm. Andre widened the central aisle so stretchers no longer displaced sleeping mats, sacrificing 2 beds for safer movement. The board approved the loss after the whiteout proved that nominal capacity could become dangerous congestion. Mara published clinic limits and refused requests to reserve beds for coordinators. Care remained a shared resource, not a reward for service. Recovery required patience that emergencies had postponed. In the workshop tunnel, Andre converted the improvised rail cart into a regular supply carrier. Ilya replaced the pump's scrap cooling fins with a safer duct and rewound the motor again, using copper recovered through supervised trades. The mixed winding stayed as an emergency spare. Tunnel sleepers helped install shelving and drainage covers, gaining dry storage without reducing the walkway. Brackett no longer expanded by claiming empty rooms. It improved by making each existing space safer, clearer, and easier to maintain. The tunnel finally worked like shared infrastructure. Helena's full hearing ended with removal from Municipal Logistics Authority and a requirement to assist the cooperative under supervision. She retained food, shelter, medical care, and the right to challenge evidence. At the surface market, she helped reconcile surviving fuel records with public inventories. Mara watched the first distribution, but did not control it. Supplies moved by posted need and witnessed count. Helena's knowledge of city systems remained valuable. Her former power to hide those systems did not return. The ruling separated accountability from revenge. 6 weeks after the blackout, the volcanic haze still dimmed noon, but the deepest freeze had passed. Brackett housed fewer people as repaired buildings reopened under the heat cooperative. The platform retained its clinic, workshop, and emergency sleeping rows. The blue chalk line remained uncovered, preserved beneath clear sealant at the centre of the floor. New residents learned why it existed, not as a border between worthy and unworthy, but as the first honest measurement of what the station could promise. Daylight returned slowly through the ash. The frost gate stayed open during daylight and closed only for maintenance or measured heat loss. Andre installed permanent drains where ice had once trapped the track. Rowan replaced the failed hinge cable with a simple hot water loop that could be inspected by sight. No one badge controlled the wheel. 2 seals and a public log governed closure. The gate that had nearly divided 2 shelters became their busiest connection, carrying repair crews, clinic carts, and ration deliveries beneath streets still blocked by snow. By the 4th month, 3 neighbouring buildings connected to the cooperative loop. Each connection required insulation, a return meter, and agreement to the district charter. No building received unlimited warmth. In exchange for predictable heat, residents contributed repair shifts, materials, or clinic support according to ability. Ilya trained new electrical crews. Rowan taught thermal inspection without keeping the tablet's methods private. The dead device remained on a shelf, useful as a reminder that information mattered most when others could question it. Each building kept an independent shutoff and public meter. The surface market reopened beneath patched awnings. Meltwater ran between stalls, carrying ash into new drains. Mara organised the rotating clinic table there twice a week, while Rowan inspected heaters only when invited by the cooperative. They walked back together after one long shift, speaking about ordinary choices instead of emergency thresholds. Their closeness remained quiet and adult, built from work neither had surrendered to the other. Neither treated survival as a debt that required romance in return. Repair crews traded skills instead of favours. The red brass valve remained behind clear protective glass, but the case was never locked. Instructions sat beside it in symbols and colour marks that any trained adult could follow. Rowan's burned hand no longer appeared in every decision around the wheel. On most days, another engineer opened it while he inspected gutters, trained crews, or repaired minor leaks. The valve had saved Brackett because he found it. The district survived because ownership of it had widened beyond him. Anyone could see whether it was open. The preserved blue line crossed the platform beneath thousands of footsteps. Visitors asked why a thriving heat node kept a mark from its worst night. Mara answered that rules should remember the conditions that created them. Rowan added that capacity was not cruelty and compassion was not pretending limits disappeared. Brackett's charter held both ideas in public tension. That tension kept the station from becoming either a locked machine or an open promise that collapsed under its own kindness. Every adult crossing it inherited the same explanation. 4 months after the whiteout, thaw water ran through repaired gutters above Brackett. The platform served as clinic, workshop, meeting hall, and emergency shelter for the connected district. Helena awaited the final civil review under the same rules as everyone else. Ilya led an electrical training crew. Andrei supervised tunnel maintenance with paired access. Mara chaired no permanent council. Rowan was one engineer among many, valued for precision and corrected when he mistook control for safety. The gutters had been rebuilt by rotating crews. The city above remained scarred by ash, broken glass, and months of cold. Yet 3 buildings glowed from heat that no single office could hide or withhold. Brackett's doors opened each morning under posted limits and shared responsibility. Rowan looked once toward the red valve, then followed Mara into the thawing street, while another trained engineer took the watch. The Refuge had become durable precisely because it no longer depended on either of them. Subscribe to the Shelter Protocol for another complete survival story.